Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your patience. I'm Bucks County District Attorney Jen Shorn. To my left is Chief Gregory Beidler of the County Detectives. To his left, Chief Robert Colton of the Bristol Township Police Department. And to his right, I should say, Detective Emily Ann Mialetti. To her right, Lieutenant C.J. Winnick. To his right, ADA Emily Knight. To her right, Detective Eric Landamia of the District Attorney's Office. To his right, Detective Bill Mooney of the District Attorney's Office. And to my right, my colleague Kristen McElroy, Chief Deputy District Attorney. Kristen and Emily are the prosecutors assigned to this case. Earlier this morning, we arrested 40-year-old Andrew Gallo of Bristol Township for crimes involving sexual victimization of 6 different women. He was arraigned today before Judge Terrence Hughes and remanded to the Bucks County Correctional Facility pending bail, which was set at $5 million, 10%. Over the course of a year, this defendant invited women to his home in Bristol Township, where he surreptitiously hid dangerous drugs and alcohol, provided that alcohol to his victims, which rendered them so impaired that they were unable to consent to anything, let alone sexual acts. He ultimately raped 5 of the 6 victims. While sexually assaulting those 6 victims, he also physically assaulted those victims. He used such force in strangling his victims that some lost consciousness. These victims suffered such ill effects from the drugs that they unknowingly ingested that some reported being up for days. One said she was up for 7 straight days, unable to fall asleep. A number of them sought medical attention due to the severity of the side effects of the drugs that they unknowingly ingested. Some reported experiencing hallucinations and psychosis. The victims in this case are so courageous. They came forward to report crimes that, quite frankly, predators like this assume the victims won't have the strength to do so, and I commend them for their strength and courage. I commend the 2 that initially reported this case and each and every one thereafter that disclosed their victimization to the police. The defendant arranged for dates with much younger women on a social media platform called sugardaddymeet.com. He made it a point to make sure those dates occurred at his home, where once he snared his victims, he would, as mentioned, surreptitiously hide drugs in drinks and provide those drinks to his victims to render them so impaired so he could exploit their state and victimize them. He methodically carried out what was clearly pre-planned crimes with the sole purpose of satisfying his deviant sexual desire. I need to take a moment not only to commend the victims for their strength, but to law enforcement for the job they did on this complex case. They executed a search warrant not too long ago, and clearly the defendant was unaware that they would be arriving at his home. And not only did they find an open bottle of alcohol that contained methamphetamine mixed within, but they actually found a victim being victimized when they arrived. Their work is not done, though, because we are quite confident that there are more victims in this case. And of course, that's where we use you, the media, and we appeal to the community. We need the community's help to provide any information they may have related to this case or related to this defendant. And certainly, if others have been victimized, please, we're asking you that you come forward and report to the number that we've provided, report your victimization, so that the men and women in this case can do what they do and get justice for all of you. I'm going to turn it over to Chief Colton, and then we'll answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. The only comments I have is this is an excellent example of law enforcement cooperation to remove a violent sexual predator from our communities. I want to thank Detective Mialetti for her hard work, the DA's office in Bucks County for their assistance to removing this person from our community, and we hope that if there are any other victims out there, please come forward so you can have justice as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any questions?
Jen, and obviously not details, but you mentioned that a victim was was there at the time when law enforcement arrived?
Yes.
What do you mean by, again, understanding the delicacy of it? What do you mean by that? What were the circumstances?
In his home, suffering ill effects from drugs that were provided by the defendant, where she unknowingly ingested those drugs, where he engaged in violent sexual acts. And I should mention, the youngest victim out of these victims is only 17 years of age.
The age can range from 17 to
30, I believe, is the oldest. This individual is 40 years old, and he intended to prey upon women who were young and naive. And in one particular case, perhaps so heart-wrenching, one victim never even so much as had a margarita, but knew that you salted the rim. And she thought, and witnessed him salt the rim and thought it was salt on the rim, but when she ingested the margarita, she noticed the salt tasted different. And in fact, we believe, obviously, based on information later received, that that was in fact methamphetamine on the rim of that margarita. But that just is an example of just how naive some of the victims were.
Were all of those victims, did he meet all of them through the website Sugar Daddy? And is there any evidence he used any other websites or tools to lure in victims?
We do know that he used Sugar Daddy. We know that he had two different names associated with his account. But at this juncture, we're still very much investigating whether or not there were other social media platforms, or quite frankly, if crimes like this were unfolding elsewhere beyond, the four walls of his home.
Can you talk about the timing of the investigation, when these various victims came forward? Careful with my houses. Some might wonder why did this go on for so long, and why wasn't he arrested after the first victim? Can you kind of talk about when they came forward and the progression of the investigation?
Yeah, I mean, we see this all the time. Crimes like these, sexual victimization of victims, whether it be women, men, young women, men, or minors, often do go unreported. And quite frankly, predators oftentimes do get away. And it takes the strength and courage of victims coming forward that helps the other victims come forward. Obviously, there's a stigma associated with crimes like these, and this was a tricky investigation for the police because we needed to corroborate through toxicology some of the information we received, because some of it was historical information. We had some victims who received medical treatment where their toxicology at the hospital revealed drugs in their system that they never knowingly ingested. But we needed to confirm what was seized pursuant to the search warrant. But we had very much had eyes on the defendant and his movements pending his arrest.
Can you tell us when the first incident happened? I know you said it took place over the course of a year. Then my next question would be, was meth the primary drug that he used in each case?
Yes, so we know that, I believe as of June of last year, was the first indication as it relates to these victims of him communicating on the social media platform that I mentioned. Methamphetamine was one of the substances found in his home in that open bottle of tainted liquor. We do believe, though, other substances such as MDMA, often referred to as Molly, and other substances were perhaps administered to these victims. And, obviously this investigation is still unfolding as it relates to that.
Was he honest about who he was on his profile? Was he using his legal name and age and everything?
You know what? Yeah, he was. He was pretty honest, and I think he thought he was beyond reproach, quite frankly. I think he was banking on the fact that victims would not report these crimes.
Did the victims say anything when the drugs took effect on them? Do they remember what he was doing?
Some describe that he was literally having intercourse with them so violently and choking them that they would clearly indicate they wanted it to stop and that they were terrified, and he disregarded that. Some would describe that like involuntary movements, like one victim said her jaw was constantly going back and forth based on drugs. And some of these women never touched an illegal substance in their life and obviously suffered terrible ill effects.
Another question for me. I know this isn't the first time that we've heard of someone using a dating site to prey on women. What's your advice to anyone really who uses a dating site? Their safety, of course, should be top of mind.
This is a woman's worst nightmare, a young woman's worst nightmare. Sadly, you have to take steps to protect yourself, whether you're out drinking in an establishment or certainly going to somebody's home. This is frightening, and it's someone's worst nightmare. And we do know in one instance, the investigation revealed that a friend accompanied her friend because she had concerns about her well-being, and we know that that did not stop this defendant. So it is a cautionary tale, sadly, to advise women to be so careful. You don't know who you're meeting in these settings, and certainly going back to somebody's home. And we are not blaming the victims, so I need to be abundantly clear, and I know you're not by the nature of your question, but yes, it's very concerning.
Can you talk about this website, sugardaddymeet.com? Some of them say perhaps money's exchanged, and how cooperative they were with the investigation. There's some sites that may take safety seriously, and there are some that don't.
And they were not very cooperative and gave us the bare minimum and not specifically what we asked for. And it's not lost on me that these platforms know that they're inviting dangerous things to unfold. We do find some social media platforms very cooperative with law enforcement. I would state unequivocally that Sugar Daddy was not one of those platforms. Okay? If there are no further questions, thank you for your time.
Is there a crime in that? I mean, that they're not helpful?
It's hard to say. I remember back in the trafficking cases when other states' attorney general's offices shut down Backpage, which was commonly hosting human trafficking cases, sexual crimes, and unfortunately it just drove predators to other more obscure sites. So it's hard to say, but right now our focus is identifying more victims of Andrew Gallo, but also certainly putting on blast how dangerous platforms are like this.
I have a question. Had the victims, when they went to his home and these incidents occurred, was that their first time meeting him, or had they had previous encounters with him?
Some, it was their first time meeting him, and some others had previous encounters. So there's a distinction with some of the 6 victims that have been charged. But we do believe, he would carry out his crimes, with victims virtually on the first encounter. So yes, but some did previously know him. If that makes sense. All right, thank you very much.